Yo, what up? Ogechi here, aka Aghaji, and I'm back with another review. Now, today's review is going to be on the third story arc in the Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star manga series, the Golan arc. Now, this picks up after the Shin arc and the Southern Cross arc, which is basically just two arcs in one. But I'm going to call the Golan arc both the second arc or the third arc. I'm going to call it the third arc, just to keep it, simple. Now, this arc picks up right after the Shin arc, and Kensho travels around the post-apocalyptic world, and then he faces, a new threat after, Shin, which is the Golan army, but the army was called the God's Army in the anime adaptation from 1986, but in the original manga they called the Golan Army arc. And as we come to find out, the Golan Army arc, started out, as Red Berets, especially in the U.S. Army, as we assume, And then one of their, the leader of this army is the Colonel. And before the nuclear war, he and his team were Red Berets, and they served the U.S. military, during that time, which is probably Vietnam, maybe, who knows, because since the manga was published in 1983, and not to mention the whole Vietnam War started around the 60s and 70s and around that time. Their commanding officers, who's part of the U.S. Army, was very sleazy, very gritty, and he doesn't think nothing. He doesn't see the Red Berets as human beings. He sees them as just, tools. And he basically said that he could easily use a push of a red button to end this entire war, which is definitely foolish. And guess what? He definitely pushed that button, and then afterwards, the whole nuclear war started, and that's how we got into the post-apocalyptic world that we're in Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star. Somehow, the Colonel and his fellow Red Berets, survived this, and they think, it was because of, the Christian God, and so that's how the Golan Army, also known as God's Army in the anime adaptation, was formed. And the leader is the Colonel, and one of the well-known officers outside of that is Sergeant Mad, and there's this other character, I forgot his name. He has a whip that's sharp as a knife, and that's how, we have our villains, in terms of their origin story. And as we know, Kensho wanders throughout this land, and he comes into contact with them, with the Golan Army, especially after he settled with a ruffian, I believe, that was causing trouble in a restaurant, just like, and then, especially after he saw the army kidnap some people, and all that stuff, that type of stuff, which shows that the Golan Army is very corrupt, despite them saying that they were chosen by the Christian God, but that's neither here nor there, Oh, fun fact, the Colonel, was the main inspiration for the character Rolento in the side-scrolling beat-em-up Final Fight, and, and Rolento will also appear in the Street Fighter games, which makes sense since Final Fight and Street Fighter takes place in the same universe, And also, fun fact, rival schools and Muscle Bomber, aka Saturday Night Slam Masters, also take place in the Street Fighter universe, just to give you a little heads up about that. But anyway, let's get back to the story arc. Kensho decides to settle with the Golan's army. He was defeated, he defeated that one person with the whip that sharpens a knife, with a very powerful technique. Hokuto Jijin Jizai Kyuk. I believe that's the name of it. It's been a while since I've read that arc as well as watched, the anime adaptation from '86. So my memory is a little foggy. But anyways, and then he decides to face with the other men again. You know what I'm saying? And he pretends to be defeated by the Golden Army one time so he can get to their base. You know what I'm saying? And hey, his plan succeeded. You know what I'm saying? He was able to mop the floor with some of the Golan Army grunts with ease. And then there comes with Sergeant Mad. You know what I'm saying? And he has some pretty good knife fighting skills, I would definitely say. Very fast for a guy of his large size. You know what I'm saying? But with Kenshiro being the successor, the 63rd successor or 64th successor of Hokuto Shinken, he was able to, defeat Sergeant Mad by hitting one of his pressure points on the neck. And, and because of this, Sergeant Mad's body will move on its own and things like that, and he falls into the water. And Kenshiro interrogates him where the colonel is, and, Sergeant Mad talks after, despite some, resistance here and there. Suffice to say, afterwards, Sergeant Mad is killed, you know what I'm saying, since he's already dead, boosh. And then we get to the fight between Kenshiro and the colonel, you know what I'm saying. And it's a pretty interesting fight, I would say, especially since the colonel recognizes that Kenshiro is a master of Hokuto Shinken. And he reveals that he's also skilled in Chinese martial arts as well. And he's a Nanto Seiken user, just like Shin. While Shin is a practitioner and successor of Nanto Koshoken, the colonel is a practitioner of Nanto Muken. And I forgot the English translation of it. Again, it's been a minute since I've read this arc. But it revolves around like the fists of the cat, the South Star cat fist, I believe, or something to that effect. Again, my memory's a little fuzzy since it's, like I said, it's been a long time since I've read this arc in the manga. You know what I'm saying? So bear with me, y'all. Anyways, we get to see that the colonel, he ain't a scrub. You know what I'm saying? He definitely got he definitely got hands. You feel me? But Kenshiro was able to, he gave Kenshiro a little bit of a run of his money. He gave Kenshiro a bit of a fight. But Kenshiro was able to overcome this, to adapt, and defeats the colonel. Surprisingly, especially since Lin and Bot arrived trying to help him out. Specifically, Lin. You know what I'm saying? But afterwards, the colonel is defeated and killed. The Golan Army has been abolished, and the Tyrant that was oppressed by them were definitely free for the time being. So, and then afterwards, Kenshiro would go on, and along with Lin and Bat, will go on to their journey into the wastelands. Suffice to say. You know what I'm saying? Despite my fuzziness on the details and the plot details in the story arc, this is actually pretty good in my opinion. You know what I'm saying? It's a pretty good follow-up after the Shin arc. You know what I'm saying? I could definitely say. And, the action is still awesome as always. The art is still amazing to look at. Tetsuo Hara definitely did his thing with the art. And Buronson definitely, upped his game a little bit with the writing, I would definitely say. You can definitely show, that the writing and the art will progress in the later story arcs, from the Fang Clan arc, the Jagi arc, and the Amoeba arc, the Cassandra arc, and then, after that. So, which we'll get into in a later way. But suffice to say, it will be the catalyst for the story arcs in part 1 of the Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of North Star manga. You know what I'm saying? So, I definitely recommend y'all giving this arc a read. You know what I'm saying? Especially if you enjoy the Shin arc. You know what I'm saying? This arc gets a 4.5 out of 5. hopefully y'all enjoy this review despite me being a little fuzzy on the details, you know what I'm saying? Especially since it's been a minute since I've read this story arc in the manga, you know what I'm saying? So it's going to be a little fuzzy, and I also apologize for some of the brain farts, you know, here and there, and the long pauses. So bear with me on that. Anyway, let me know what y'all think about the Golan Army arc in the Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star manga, in the comments below if y'all ready to let it. If y'all read it already, excuse me, sorry I can't talk. I'm tongue-tied as a motherfucker. Oh, just one more thing before I say all the other stuff. I want to give a shout out to the T-shirted historian, you know what I'm saying? You know, he does a good job with his Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star content on YouTube. So, if y'all a fan of Hokuto no Ken, aka Fist of the North Star, I suggest y'all watch his videos and then subscribe to his channel. So, I want to give him a quick shout out real quick. Anyway, with that out of the way, if y'all like this video, y'all can hit that like button below, share it, comment. Y'all can also subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to keep y'all notified on the uploads. Y'all can also follow me in my other social media accounts, and stay tuned for more other reviews and more other videos along the way. So with all that said, this is your boy, Ogechi Aghaji, aka Oaghaji, aka the Pervy Sensei, signing out. Peace.